it's one of the things you hear all the time, and that's that, I'm better than that player, right? So players will often say, oh, I should be crushing this game. I'm so much better than that player. I'm just like, oh, I'm 10 times better. Oh, these people are so soft, so on and so forth. And I really started to think about like what it means to be better than an opponent at a poker table. Like, how do you classify better? And it's a weird term, and it's something that's thrown around a lot. And I don't really think, sometimes people just make the claim and it's not correct. They think that they're better than a player and they're not. And if you look at poker at a fundamental level, right? And you break it down to its components, and really at the end of the day, poker is a game of mistakes. So you're trying to induce mistakes in your opponent and minimize the mistakes that you make. So you could say that, you're better than an opponent if you're technically making less mistakes than your opponent, right? You can arguably assume that. So you could like sit down with two players can play 1,000 hands, and you can review it for mistakes and see that one player makes 5 times more mistakes than the other. Technically, that person's better, right? Makes sense. However, that's kind of difficult to quantify. You don't really know what everybody has, and you can't really figure out exactly what a player has all the time. So it's difficult to come up with that definition. One of the things that you tend to see happen is that players correlate knowledge with being good, right? So they think that if a player knows a lot about poker, that they're a good poker player. And that's a fundamental flaw in poker, and I'll talk about it in another video a lot. But for the most part, knowledge doesn't mean you should apply that knowledge, that you could effectively apply that knowledge. So the best example is kind of like you're at a table and somebody's like, what's pot odds, right? And you immediately assume, oh, I'm better than this player. They don't know what pot odds are. And just because the player doesn't know what pot odds are doesn't mean it doesn't mean they're making less mistakes than you are. It just means they don't know what pot odds are. However, usually players that know what pot odds are probably going to be better than players that don't. I agree with you on that. But just because a player just because you know what a topic is, it doesn't mean that you're applying it a lot. And this is the problem is, a lot of players. I have a private student come in here around a couple weeks ago, and he said something like, I should be crushing this game, right? And I was like, oh, it's interesting, like, well, why? And he's like, oh, the players are so bad, and so on and so forth. And like, crushing a game, just because you're so much better than, you might be so much better than other poker players at the table because they're making so much mistakes because they're playing so much. And for you to crush that game, all you have to do is sit down and value bet. That might technically be crushing a game. And sometimes I think what players do is they tend to sit down at a table and they tend to think, I'm so much better than these players. And they use that as an excuse to really widen their range, yet they don't really know how to exploit their players' mistakes, which I'll also talk about in another video, which is probably the most important thing. And it's interesting, it's like better poker players, better poker players at a higher level. So like if you have like some of the best poker players in the world sit down and, play a game, and I think better, it doesn't really refer, they all understand the game in and out. It boils down to things like their current emotional state, how well they can manage their tilt, what's going on in their external life, and are they able to separate what's going on in the crazy world that we live in from the poker table and able to make those right decisions, because they all understand the game at this element. And I thought about this as really, 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 really important concept. And I try not to tell myself I am better, right? So I never say that I am better than other players. Well, I do say that. I'm not going to bullshit. I say that a lot. But I try not to now. Like when I walk into a game, I'm trying not to say I am better. What I try to say is this, and this is really, if those of you who can really look at this is a really, really, really powerful distinction. I say today I am going to be the best poker player at this table. Not I am better than these players, but today I'm going to play better than them. That is a significant difference. And what it does is it adds a layer of motivation. It adds a layer of like humility, or it adds like you being humble, right? So it creates that so that when you sit down at a table, it's not like, oh, I'm better, I don't need to do anything. It's that, no, I'm going to be the best poker player at this table today. So I'm going to pay more attention than the players around me. I'm going to be more focused. I'm going to make more right decisions. And I think it's a much better way of approaching a table than, I'm better than these players, let me just sit down and play with them. It adds that level of motivation. It can make you 20 or 30. And it's so crazy how powerful this thought is. And it's something I really looked at in my own game, and it's something I'm really I wrote it down on it's one of the things to say to myself before I sit down, like, no matter what, I'm going to play better. Because even though I might be better than the poker players at that table, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be playing better than them that day. And it's an important distinction. But thanks for listening. Try to apply that to your game. Thank you so much for the support, everybody. I love the comments. I love the emails. You know, sometimes like I don't want to make a video and then I'll get an email at 3 a.m. in the morning and I'm like, thanks. So it just pumps me up. And so I always love it, even though I don't answer to everybody. Please subscribe. There's a link right here. You can subscribe to the channel. We release 2 videos every week. And also, please check out beyondtells.com. For those of you who don't know, my background is in psychology. I was an adjunct psychology professor, and I run a company called the Nonverbal Group, which is a behavioral analysis organization where I'm a body language consultant, essentially. And what we've done is we've created a product called Beyond Tells, and it's the sickest training for live poker ever, in my opinion. What it does is it teaches you how to read poker players at the table via behaviors. So beyondtells.com could explain it more than I possibly can. And you know, thank you so much for supporting me. And also check out the links below in the subscription page. We have an email newsletter that's going out once a week. And that's about it. Thanks, guys.